As you can see, what we're drawing today is going to be quite a lot of information and quite a lot of detail in one figure. You may want to go ahead and, draw until it seems to be getting a little crowded and then kind of start over with a new frame and start to draw in more details. I prefer to put everything in one place, but you can see that it gets to be a little bit crazy. For the drawing today, you will need a red, blue, and black. When we draw the heart, I kind of start with the right side of the heart, and I always outline it in blue. You can see it's kind of like half of a heart you could draw here. And in red, you're going to draw the left side of the heart, which we will outline in red, and it's a little bit bigger. And you notice it has that point there. The point down at the bottom is called the apex. The top of the heart that we're looking at here is called the base. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn to the right side of the heart, and we're going to draw the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. These are two tubes that come into the right side of the heart. And next we're going to go ahead and draw a chamber called the right atrium, RA, right atrium. An atrium is a receiver of blood. So what's going to happen is the SVC and the IVC, superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, are going to bring blood into the right atrium where it will be received. The next thing that's going to happen is that blood is going to make its way down into the right ventricle, RV, right ventricle. Now the ventricles of the heart are the pumpers of blood. So again, an atrium is a receiver, a ventricle is a pumper. The next structure we're going to draw is again in blue, and I'll talk about why we're using blue and red. We're going to draw a tube running up the middle of the heart. And it's tricky to draw the tubes. There's actually two tubes that run straight up the middle of the heart. So what we're going to draw is just a tube towards the top, and then towards the left direction, we're going to draw the rest of the tube. But you see that I keep it open other than, besides the start and then the finish of the tube, I'm kind of keeping it open for a particular reason. Now the tube coming up the center is called the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary trunk. And the tube going off to the side there is the left pulmonary artery, the left pulmonary artery. Now the color blue refers to the fact that this blood that is making its way through all of these structures, as you can see it's going from the right ventricle up through these tubes. All of this blood is colored blue because it is deoxygenated or at a lower oxygen level. So the pulmonary artery is going to take blood directly to the lungs, and in the lungs then we have the oxygenation of the blood. Blood becomes oxygenated in the lungs. Sometimes students are under the impression that the heart is responsible for oxygenation. That is not true. The heart has a very simple job. It simply pumps blood either to the lungs or to the rest of the body. Next, we're going to go back to our red, and we're going to draw our left pulmonary veins. We're going to stick with the red, and we're going to go ahead and draw our left atrium and our left ventricle. Atrium, again, is a receiver of blood, and a ventricle is a pumper of blood. And so this red blood, newly oxygenated, is going to make its way back from the lungs into the left atrium, where it's received, and then to the left ventricle, where it will be pumped. The next structure we're going to draw is another tube going up the center of the heart. You kind of have to overlap them. I know it looks a little confusing, but kind of reference the pictures in your books as well and make sure that you're kind of getting this as best you can. It's tough to draw, but kind of if you look at the pictures and compare them, you'll see kind of where it makes sense. Now this structure up at the top that we're drawing is probably one of the best known structures of the heart. It's called the aorta, which sounds a lot like artery, and that is in fact what it is. It is a type of artery. In this case, this artery is bringing blood to the rest of the body through these different tubes that kind of come out from there. We'll discuss those with the circulatory system a little bit more. And this part of the aorta is actually specifically called the aortic arch. There is a continuation of the aorta after this, which we will have to keep in mind when we talk about the blood vessels. So now we're going to switch to a black marker, and we're going to go ahead and draw some valves. Valves. Now, this is the first time you're being introduced to valves. All valves have only one purpose: to prevent backflow. All valves prevent backflow, and they have different ways of doing this. Sometimes they're passive, sometimes they're muscular and active, but they all have that same basic purpose: to prevent backflow. You want to make sure that blood continues to flow only in one direction. We've been drawing in these arrows to indicate the directionality of blood flow, and that is pretty much how it works. Sometimes blood tries to backflow into another area, but there is a valve there stopping it from doing it. So the first valve we're going to draw is the bicuspid valve. The second is the tricuspid valve, and you'll notice that those are the valves that exist on the left side and the right side between the atria and the ventricles. The next valves we're going to draw are the semilunar valves, the aortic semilunar valve and the pulmonary semilunar valve. If you look at the position, you'll notice that the semilunar valves exist between the ventricles and then the tubes that lead out either to the lungs or to the rest of the body, either the pulmonary trunk or the aorta. So those are the semilunar valves, the aortic semilunar valve and the pulmonary semilunar valve. I also did want to go ahead and draw the interventricular septum, because that is one structure of the heart that isn't as well known, but it does come up quite a lot, especially with the electrical activity of the heart. A lot of that electrical fun stuff happens inside of the interventricular septum. So make sure that you know that. The term inter means in between, and so interventricular means in between the ventricles, and a septum is simply a dividing line between. So the interventricular septum is the dividing line between the ventricles. I'm going to go ahead and continue, although I know it's a lot to a lot to process and a lot to draw. I'm going to go ahead and draw the rest of that pulmonary system. And this would be the right pulmonary artery, which would also be continuation of the pulmonary trunk. Remember that we already drew the left pulmonary artery going toward the left lung, but we're also now going to draw the right pulmonary artery, which would be going towards the right lung. Do recall that everything left to right is reversed when you're looking at an anterior perspective, which is what we are doing here. And we go ahead and draw in our right pulmonary veins as well, returning blood back to the heart that is fully oxygenated from the lungs. Now, the last structures we're going to be drawing are the muscular systems. There's actually 3 different muscles we have to draw. The first one is the easiest one to spot in a model or in a dissection. They are very distinctive. These are in the floor of the ventricles. They are called the papillary muscles. And we have attachments, those little strings that attach directly from the papillary muscles up to the tricuspid and bicuspid valves. Bicuspid on the left side and tricuspid on the right. So we're going to go ahead and label both of these. The papillary muscles, the word papilla means nipple-like projection. So the papillary muscles resemble a nipple-like shape. And then the chordae tendineae are strings that actually are connected between the papillary muscle and the bicuspid valve, and the papillary muscle and the tricuspid valve, depending if you're on the left or the right side. So they actually help to tug these valves closed at particular times during the heartbeat to ensure that they're closed, again, to prevent backflow. Lastly, we have to draw some muscles that oftentimes students have a little trouble remembering that these are here, but they're so important. The heart needs to be capable of squeezing. That's actually the basic thing that it does. And so there are muscles in the walls of these chambers, in the walls of the atria and in the walls of the ventricles, that allow them to have a squeeze to ensure that blood continues to flow where it's supposed to flow. So in the atria, we have muscles called pectinate muscles. And in the walls of the ventricles, we have muscles that are called trabeculae carni.